مساء الخير عن جديد. بعتذر كان في مشكل بالصوت. كنا عم نقول باول بآخر اجتماع لمح لرفع معدلات الفوائد، لمح تلميح لرفع معدلات الفوائد. فهلا لما يرفع الفوائد انا بحط علامة استفهام كبيرة انه معقول يرجع يرفع الفوائد بالاجتماع اللي جاي، اللي راح يكون تقريبا بديسمبر، تقريبا نص ديسمبر، اللي هو بيكون اخر اجتماع لهيدي السنة. رح يحكي عن السي بي اي، رح يحكي عن البي سي اي، رح يقول انه انا السي بي اي عندي بحدود 3.7%، الكور بي سي اي اللي هو كمان 3.7% على معدل الييرلي لبل. رح يقول انه عندي ليبر ماركت اللي هو سوق العمل اللي هو بعده كتير مرن وكتير بيتحمل بعد رفع اضافي للفوائد. بده يحكي عن المعدلات البطاله اللي هن 3.8%، اللي هن اصلا كانوا شايفينها من قبل 4.7 و 4.8%. رح يقول انه نحن بعد بحق لنا او عندنا القدره انه نرجع نعلي الفوائد بالاجتماعات اللي جاي. كنت عم اقول اذا بقارن اليوم الاقتصاد الامريكي اللي هو عندنا معدلات سي بي اي 3.7%، عندنا معدلات الفوائد اللي هي 5.5% للمره الثالثه عم يثبت، وعندي الجي دي بي اللي هو الناتج المحلي الاجمالي 4.9%. بشوف انه الاقتصاد الامريكي هو اقتصاد مرن واقتصاد قوي كثير، قادر لهلا يكافح معدلات التضخم. اذا بقارن الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية باقتصاد غير مثل مثلا بريطانيا، بشوف انه بريطانيا عندهم السي بي اي 6.7%، اللي هو رقم جدا 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 عالي. انا هدفي هو 2%، فانا مينيموم بدي سنة او اكثر لاقدر اوصل للهدف تبعي، مع معدلات فوائد اللي هن 5.25%، اللي هو رقم مرتفع نسبة لباقي الدول. مع جي دي بي اللي هو الناتج المحلي الاجمالي كنا بحدود ناقص 0.5، اخر مره 0.2. عم نتراوح، يعني بعدنا على شفير الهاويه. مشان هيك البنك المركزي البريطاني بيتريس كثير وبيعد للمليون قبل ما ياخذ قرار انه يرفع الفوائد، لانه اي رفع اضافي للفوائد هلا بنشوف التاثير تبعه بعد 6 شهور ما انا ما ارفع الفوائد. يعني انا كل معدل الفوائد مثلا اليوم عملنا بوز، بعد تقريبا 6 شهور ل 12 شهر ليبين المفعول تبع هول الفوائد. مشان هيك هل قد بتاخذ الانفليشن تضخم وقت كرمال تنزل وكرمال انا ارجع ل 2% الهدف تبعي. فاليوم الانفليشن تضخم اللي كان سببه الاساسي هي جائحه كورونا والكوانتيتيف ايزنج او التيسير الكمي اللي كان عم يصير. الدوله بدها ترجع تسحب المصاري، ما فينا زياده الطلب على العرض كرمال جيب حاجات واسعار وسلع انا اصلا مش بحاجه لها، بيوصلني للتضخم. لانزل ورد هيدا التضخم بدي كتير وقت. وهون نوه شغلي بنسميه نحن بالاقتصاد بنسميه سيناريو موندل فليمنج. وقت انا بيجي بقول موندل فليمنج، يعني انا اليوم نزلت ل 3% تضخم، رجعت طلعت ل 3.7، رجعت ثبتت على 3.7، معقول ايش بعد شوفه اعلى شوي، يرجع ينزل يرجع يطلع. ولا مره بيكون كتير عم ينزل ولا مره بيكون كتير عم يطلع، الا بحالات اكيد معينه جدا. فلا ارجع اتخلص من التضخم انا كله على بعضه من اول وجديد، انا بحاجه لكثير كثير 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 وقت. هلا التركيز رح يكون، شفنا انه السوق ما عمل تقريبا ولا حركه صراحه تذكر. بكل بساطه بتوقع السوق هيدي الحركه. هلا في حال لمح على رفع اضافي للفوائد بديسمبر الشهر الجاي بنشوف حركه. عاده كان الذهب والدهو والناسداك عم يعملوا فيك بريك اوت. عادة آخر اف ام سيك غطيناه كان عمل مورنينج ستار على شمعة، ايفنينج ستار عفوا، على شمعة الساعة، وشفناها كلنا مع بعض وقلنا رح ينزل من 1950، رح ينزل ل 1900 ونزل. فاليوم إذا بس بنجي نطلع شوي على أهم المؤشرات الداو جونز، أنا عندي تقريبا على سبورت قوي. اذا بنزل لشمعه الاربع ساعات على الداو بشوف انه يمكن يكون عندي احتماليه انفيرتد هيد اند شولدرز. رح نرسمه مع بعض على الشكل التالي. النك لاين تبعي اللي هو تقريبا على مناطق 33200 تقريبا و50 خلينا نقولها، لانه الداو في يعمل اختراقات كثير وهميه، في ارجع اشوفه تقريبا عم يطلع للترند لاين. بينما اذا برجع شوي للديلي في اشوف انه انا هاي النقطه اللي هون اللي هي الكومبينيشن بين الترند لاين وبين الديلي ام اي، انا صراحه هاي المناطق براقبها وبراقبها كثير. على شمعة الديلي في شوف هوديك المناطق اللي فوق. على شمعة الاربع ساعات في راقب النك لاين، تسكير شمعة ساعة او تسكير شمعة اربع ساعات كرمال نكون دقيقين اكثر، بشوف من بعدها ريتست للنك لاين، ومن بعدها بيكون عم يطلع بنقيس المسافة من هون لهون وبنعمل لها ريجكشن. هلا ليش الداو نزل لهي المناطق؟ بكل بساطة حكينا عنها قبل ورح نرجع نرسمها كلنا عن جديد. انا كان عندي اليوت ويف رائعه على الداو مع كوركشن اللي هي A B C. اذا بقيس الاكستنشن تبع C في يشوف بكل بساطه انه هو يرد على مناطق 1.61.8. رائعه الاليوت ويف كانت صراحه. انا صراحه وقت شفتها للاليوت ويف قلت معقول يكون 33600، وبتذكر واصلا موجوده على اللايفات اللي قبل قلنا احتمال كثير بعيد انه يرجع ينزل لهون المناطق، وصراحه نزل لها، وباللحظه اللي نزل لها رجعنا شفنا من بعدها موف كثير قوي بولش على الداو جونز. وهيدي اذا بدكم كانت فيك بريك اوت او اختراق وهمي. من بعدها شفت الداو عم يرجع يطلع. مثلا نور، هل سوف يتغير اتجاه الذهب؟ راح يكون كله ناطر خطاب باول. راح نشوف مع بعض اذا بلش باول. فينا نعرف شوي عن الذهب، فينا نعرف كثير عن الذهب، بس بدنا نجرب ناخد مصدر موثوق لنكون عم ننقل الخبر. اوكي بعد ما بلش. اوكي يلا.
Do we have unanimity as well? Let's take a listen to Fed Chair Jerome Powell.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. We understand the hardship that high inflation is causing, and we remain strongly committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal. Price stability is the responsibility of the Federal Reserve. Without price stability, the economy does not work for anyone. In particular, without price stability, we will not achieve a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all. Since early last year, the FOMC has significantly tightened the stance of monetary policy. We have raised our policy interest rate by 5.25 percentage points and have continued to reduce our securities holdings at a brisk pace. The stance of policy is restrictive, meaning that tight policy is putting downward pressure on economic activity and inflation, and the full effects of our tightening have yet to be felt. Today, we decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. Given how far we have come, along with the uncertainties and risks we face, the committee is proceeding carefully. We will make decisions about the extent of additional policy firming and how long policy will remain restrictive based on the totality of the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. I'll have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Indicators suggest that economic activity has been expanding at a strong pace and well above earlier expectations. In third quarter, real GDP is estimated to have risen an outsized annual rate of 4.9%. Boosted by a surge in consumer spending. After picking up somewhat over the summer, activity in the housing sector has flattened out and remains well below levels of a year ago, largely reflecting higher mortgage rates. Higher interest rates also appear to be weighing on business fixed investment. The labor market remains tight, but supply and demand conditions continue to come into better balance. Over the past 3 months, payroll job gains averaged 266,000 jobs per month, a strong pace that is nevertheless below that seen earlier in the year. The unemployment rate remains low at 3.8%. Strong job creation has been accompanied by an increase in the supply of workers. The labor force participation rate has moved up since late last year, particularly for individuals aged 25 to 54 years, and immigration has rebounded to pre-pandemic levels. Nominal wage growth has shown some signs of easing, and job vacancies have declined so far this year. Although the jobs to workers gap has narrowed, labor demand still exceeds the supply of available workers. Inflation remains well above our longer-run goal of 2%. Total PCE prices rose 3.4% over the 12 months ending in September. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 3.7%. Inflation has moderated since the middle of last year, and readings over the summer were quite favorable. But a few months of good data are only the beginning of what it will take to build confidence that inflation is moving down sustainably toward our goal. The process of getting inflation sustainably down to 2% has a long way to go. Despite elevated inflation, longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. The Fed's monetary policy actions are guided by our mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. We are highly attentive to the risks that high inflation poses to both sides of our mandate, and we are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% objective. Noted earlier, since early last year, we have raised our policy rate by 5.25 percentage points, and we have decreased our securities holdings by more than $1 trillion. Our restrictive stance of monetary policy is putting downward pressure on economic activity and inflation. The committee decided at today's meeting to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5%, and to continue the process of significantly reducing our securities holdings. We are committed to achieving a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive to bring inflation sustainably down to 2% over time, and to keeping policy restrictive until we are confident that inflation is on a path to that objective. We are attentive to recent data showing the resilience of economic growth and demand for labor. Evidence of growth persistently above potential, or that tightness in the labor market is no longer easing, could put further progress on inflation at risk and could warrant further tightening of monetary policy. Financial conditions have tightened significantly in recent months, driven by higher, longer-term bond yields, among other factors. Because persistent changes in financial conditions can have implications for the path of monetary policy, we monitor financial developments closely. In light of the uncertainties and risks and how far we have come, the committee is proceeding carefully. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting based on the totality of the incoming data and their implications for the outlook and for economic activity and inflation, as well as the balance of risks. In determining the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time, the committee will take into account the cumulative tightening of monetary policy, the lags with which monetary policy affects economic activity and inflation, and economic and financial developments. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Reducing inflation is likely to require a period of below potential growth and some softening of labor market conditions. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Howard Schneider with Reuters. Thank you, Chair Powell, for doing this. To what you referenced the rise in long-term bond yields, to what degree did that supplant action by the Fed at this meeting?
Thanks for your question. So I'll talk about bond yields, but I want to take a second and just sort of set the broader context in which we're looking at that. So if you look at the situation, let's look at the economy first. Inflation has been coming down, but it's still running well above our 2% target. The labor market has been rebalancing, but it's still very tight by many measures. GDP growth has been strong, although many forecasters are forecasting, and they have been forecasting, that it will slow. As for the committee, we are committed to achieving a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive to bring inflation down to 2% over time. And we're not confident yet that we have achieved such a stance. So that is the broader context into which the strong economy and all the things I said, that's the context in which we're looking at this question of rates. So obviously we're monitoring, we're attentive to the increase in longer-term yields, and which have contributed to a tightening of broader financial conditions since the summer. As I mentioned, persistent changes in broader financial conditions can have implications for the path of monetary policy. In this case, the tighter financial conditions we're seeing from higher long-term rates, but also from other sources like the stronger dollar and lower equity prices, could matter for future rate decisions as long as two conditions are satisfied. The first is that the tighter conditions would need to be persistent, and that is something that remains to be seen. But that's critical. Things are fluctuating back and forth. That's not what we're looking for. With financial conditions, we're looking for persistent changes that are material. The second thing is that the longer-term rates that have moved up, they can't simply be a reflection of expected policy moves from us. That we would then, that if we didn't follow through on them, then the rates would come back down. So, and I would say on that, it does not appear that an expectation of higher near-term policy rates is causing the increase in longer-term rates. So, in the meantime, though, perhaps the most important thing is that these higher Treasury yields are showing through to higher borrowing costs for households and businesses, and those higher costs are going to weigh on economic activity to the extent this tightening persists. And, the mind's eye goes to the 8%, near 8% mortgage rate, which could have, pretty significant effect on housing. So that's how I would answer your question.
Just as a quick follow-on, to be clear on this, in your opening statement and just now, you seem to imply that you are not yet confident that financial conditions are restrictive enough to finish the fight. Is that true?
Yes, that's exactly right. To say it a different way, we haven't made any decisions about future meetings. We have not made a determination, and I will say that we're not confident this time that we've reached such a stance. We're not confident that we haven't, but we're not confident that we have. And that is the way we're going to be going into these future meetings, is to be, just determining the extent of any additional further policy tightening that may be appropriate to return inflation to 2% over time.
Gina.
Hi, Chair Powell. Thank you so much for taking our questions. I wonder, if you don't raise interest rates in December, would the presumption be that at that point that we should expect that rates are at their peak, or is there a possibility of restarting rate increases next year? And are there any costs to taking a more extended pause?
So let me start by saying we haven't made a decision about September. You're asking a hypothetical there, but we're going into the December meeting. We'll get, as you know, 2 more inflation readings, 2 more labor market readings, some data on economic activity, and so we'll be taking, and also the broader situation, the broader financial conditions situation, and the broader world situation. We'll be looking at all those things as we make a decision in December. We haven't made that decision. I would say, though, that the idea that the idea that you would be difficult to raise again after stopping for a meeting or two is just not right. I mean, the committee will always do what it thinks is appropriate at the time. And again, we haven't made any decisions at all about December. We didn't talk about making a decision in December today. Really, it was a decision for this meeting and understanding broader things.
Nick Timmeros of the Wall Street Journal. Chair Powell, did the Fed staff put a recession back into the baseline forecast in the materials for today's meeting? And how much does this tightening in financial conditions substitute for rate hikes if the tightening is pursued? You had said it was worth maybe a quarter point when we had the bank failures in the spring. What is it here on something that's presumably more straightforward and more familiar to simulate?
So I guess I don't want to answer your question about the recession, but the answer is no. I think I have to answer it since we did publicly say in the minutes. You'll know anyway in the minutes. The staff did not put a recession back in. I mean, it would be hard to see how you would do that if you look at the activity we've seen recently, which is not really indicative of a recession in the near term. In terms of how to think about translation into rate hikes, I think it's just too early to be doing that. And the main reason is we just don't know how persistent this will be. You can see how volatile it is. Different kinds of news will affect the level of rates. And I think any kind of an estimate that was, precise would hang out there and have a great chance of looking wrong very quickly. So I think what we can say is that financial conditions have clearly tightened, and you can see that in the rates that consumers and households and businesses are paying now. And over time, that will have an effect. We just don't know how persistent it's going to be, and it's tough to try to translate that in a way that I'd be comfortable communicating into how many rate hikes that is.
If I could follow up, I guess what makes you confident that tighter financial conditions will slow above trend growth when 500 basis points of rate hikes, QT, and a minor banking crisis have not thus far?
Well, that's the way our policy works is, and sometimes it works with lags, of course, which can be long and variable. But ultimately, if you raise raise interest rates, you do see those effects, and you see those effects in the economy now. You see what's happening in the housing market. You're seeing that now. You'll see, if you look at surveys of people, it's not a good time, they think, to buy durable goods of various kinds because rates are so high now. I mentioned again, we're getting reports from housing that the effects of this could be quite significant. But you're right. This has been a resilient economy, and it's, I think, been surprising in its resilience. And there are a number of possible reasons why that may be. Our job is to achieve maximum employment and price stability, and so we take the economy as it comes. It has been resilient, so we take it as it is.
Thank you. Colby Smith with the Financial Times. In terms of the thresholds that you've laid out of what could warrant further tightening, the additional evidence of persistently above trend growth or some kind of reversal in the recent easing of labor market tightness, that seems to suggest something more powerful than just one more quarter point rate hike would be necessary. And I'm just curious if that's how the committee sees it.
So we've identified those factors. Those are not meant to be the only factors or a specific test that we're going to be applying with some metrics behind it. Really, we're going to be looking at the broader picture and what's happening with our progress toward the 2% inflation goal. Is the labor market continuing to broadly cool off and achieve a better balance? We'll be looking at that. Growth, we look at growth insofar as it has implications for our two mandates. Goals, we look at that. Look at broader financial conditions. So we'll be looking at all of those things as we reach a judgment, whether we need to further tighten policy. And if we do reach that judgment, then we will further tighten policy.
Okay. And just in terms of the tightening of financial conditions, if that is having some kind of offsetting effect in terms of the need to actually, again, raise rates, what then is the potential impact on the trajectory of rate cuts? Could we see those maybe pulled forward or have to see more than what the September SEP indicated?
So the fact is the committee's not thinking about rate cuts right now at all. We're not talking about rate cuts. We're still very focused on the first question, which is, have we achieved a stance of monetary policy that's sufficiently restrictive to bring inflation down to 2% over time, sustainably? That is the question. The next question, as you know, will be for how long will we remain restrictive? Will policy remain restrictive? And what we said there is that we'll keep policy restrictive until we're confident that inflation is on a sustainable path down to 2%. That'll be the next question. But honestly, right now, we're really tightly focused on the first question. The question of rates cuts just doesn't come up because I think it's so important to get that first question, as close to right as you can.
Steve.
Steve Leisman, CNBC. Mr. Chairman, I guess I had assumed that there was a tightening bias in the committee. You say in the statement you're looking to assess the appropriate stance of monetary policy, the extent to which you may need to hike additionally. You didn't say earlier that you were sufficiently restrictive. There were forecasts for 2 rate hikes among most members of the committee. But then you just said that, we haven't made a determination. Would you say the bias right now is neutral, that there is no disposition to hike again, and that the committee largely has moved off of this forecast for 2 hikes? Or for, I'm sorry, 1 additional hike?
I think you're talking about 1 additional.
Yeah,
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I would say, the language, looking at it here, in determining the extent of additional policy firming that may be appropriate to return inflation 2% over time, that's the question we're asking.
So is it right to think of that as a hiking bias is still in the committee here?
We haven't used that term, but it's fair to say that's the question we're asking is, should we hike more? It's not, and that issue, and you're right, that in September we wrote down 1 additional rate hike, but, we'll write down another forecast, as you know, in December.
Chris.
Thank you. Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. Well, since the last meeting, the auto workers' strike has finished. Oil prices have leveled off. And yet, on the other hand, you have the outbreak of war between Israel and Hamas. How do you see all those factors taken together affecting the economy going forward? How are you thinking about those?
So there are significant issues out there. As you point out, global geopolitical tensions are certainly elevated. And that goes for the war in Ukraine. It goes for the war between Israel and Hamas. We're monitoring that. Our job is to monitor those things for economic implications. So the UAW strike, as you point out, appears to be coming to an end. Oil prices have flattened out. They haven't gone down, but I guess they've gone down a little bit from their earlier peak. Another one is the possibility of government shutdown. We got that one. So there's plenty of risk out there. But I would go back to the bigger picture from our standpoint is we've got a very strong economy, strong labor market, making progress on the labor market, making progress on inflation, and we're very focused on getting confident that we have achieved a stance of monetary policy that is sufficiently restrictive. That's really our focus.
Great. And just one quick thing. You last month had gone to York, Pennsylvania, where you talked to a lot of, last month talked to a lot of small business owners. Just curious, what sentiments did you hear from them, or what did you picked up on, and was there anything that surprised you the most in terms of what they talked about?
صراحة رح نكتفي بهيدا القدر من خطاب باول. عادة باول بيعمل كوبي بيست للخطاب تبعه، يعني هو زيت التعابير لحتى زيت الجمل. يعني المتابع باول تقريبا من 2 أو 2.5 هلا رح يشوف انه نفس الانترودكشن، نفس الكونكلوجن، نفس الكونتكست، نفس كل شيء. حكي انه هدف الانفليشن اللي هو 2% جولز، حكي عن الليبر ماركت اللي هو بعده كتير قوي وبعده عم يشوفه قوي على المدى البعيد. قال انه نحن داتا ديبندنت، رح ينطر التقارير اللي هو تقرير السي بي اي، بي سي اي، بي بي اي الى اخره من هلا، لكن على اساسها ليحدد شو بده يصير بالسياسه النقديه. حكي عن الجي دي بي 4.9% اخر كوارتر، حكي عن معدلات البطاله اللي هي 3.8، هو كان متوقع توصل لل 4.7 تقريبا. الغريب بهيدا الخطاب صراحه كان وقتها هلا اول شيء بالعادي باول بيكون مرتاح بالخطاب تبعه وهو عم يحكي. هلا اليوم كان مبين ابدا مش مرتاح. واحد اثنين، حكي عن السياسة النقدية انه شكلها رح تروح لمحل يكون متشدد اكثر من ما هو عليه هلا. وصراحة قال انا صراحة بحط علامة استفهام عن السي بي اي اللي جاي قديش رح يكون صراحة. لانه انا بالنسبة لي شخص مثل باول على الاكيد معه ديتا ومعه معطيات نحن ما معنا اياهم. هاي واحد ليجي يكون هالقد متشدد. انا بالنسبة لي الخطاب تبعه كان جدا متشدد جدا. رح نشوف بعد الذهب بعد شوي الذهب وينه، بس انا برايي لحوا على 1970 صراحه. في استعمل الكلمه اللي هيدي بتغير كل مجريات السوق وكل احداث السوق، اللي هو قال انه مش عم نفكر ابدا نعمل كت لمعدل الفايدة. يعني مش ناويين ننزل معدلات الفايده بالمدى المنظور. هيدي الجمله لوحدها بدون كل الخطاب اللي قاله بتغير السوق فوقاني تحتاني. رح نروح نحلل الاسواق على السريع. الداو جونز صراحه السبورت تبعنا محترم جدا جدا جدا. بعده لهلا كان عندي على شمعه الاربع ساعات كان عندي دوجي صراحه توقعتها انا تسكر هون. عاده داو جونز بيعمل فيك بريك اوت بالاف ام سي. حركته جدا جدا طبيعيه جدا جدا منطقيه. برايي بنشوف الحركه المضبوطه عنه بكره. انا بالنسبه لي بعده بداون ترند، يعني معقول نشوفه عم ينزل. في يكون هيك السيناريو، ما في شيء بيمنع. عم نشوفه عم يعمل لوز جديد. انا بالنسبه لي النك لاين تبعي مش عم ينكسر، هيدا لهلا بيرش ساين. اكثر من هيك صراحه على الداو جونز ما فيني شيء. رح نروح على الذهب لانه بعتقد هو اللي رح يكون عم يعمل اكثر موف، اكسبكتد موف صراحه. هنروح على شمعة الأربع ساعات. أربع ساعات رينجينج ماركت بين مناطق ال 1900 تقريبا و63 ومناطق ال 2005. صراحة شوي بشع الذهب. أنا كمحلل صراحة بنطره ليوصل لهون وبقرر شو بعمل الموف. معقول يرد شوي على الفيدرالي، ومعقول يكون عم يكفي بالحرب باخبار الحرب. انا برايي اخبار الحرب بس يكون في اخبار حرب هي اللي بتكون عم تضغى على السوق اكثر من اف ام سي. وحتى لو بده يرجع يزيد الفوائد او ما يعمل كت او ما يعمل شيء. سو حننزل شوي على لور تايم فريم لنشوف اذا كان في شيء. اوكي يمكن عندي هيد اند شولدرز. سو هيدا التريبل توب اللي كان معقول يكون هيد اند شولدرز. النك لاين تبعي بدي تسكير شمعه على الساعة، من بعدها بشوفه عم ينزل للتشانل اللي هون، او لحتى في ينزل يصيب مناطق تقريبا 1950. غير هيك انا برايي الذهب في يكون عم يرجع يعمل كونسوليديشن صغير كرمال يرجع يفاجئنا صراحه بموف كبير. رح نروح مع بعض على الدي اكس واي. على الديلي بعدني برينجينج ماركت، حتى بنشوف هون رجع دق فيها التشانل اللي نحن رسمينها، وهلا هو ببرش موف. انا برايي هاي التشانل لازم يكسرها. في حال ما كسرها سكر الشمع الديلي تحت مناطق ال 105.50، من بعدها بنشوف الدي اكس واي عم ينزل لمناطق تقريبا اللي هي هون مناطق ال 104 فاصلة تقريبا 70. بس هاي المناطق اللي هون اللي هي الكومبينيشن بين الديلي ام اي والسبورت تبع الشانل صراحه تراقب. برينجينج ماركت صراحه عاده ما بيكون في شيء نحكيه غير بس الهول عندي هون. فيها تكون هيدي ايفنينج ستار، فيها تكون السوق طالع سكر الدوجي هيدي عم تسكر تحت النص تبع الشمعة الخضراء، فيها تكون ايفنينج ستار. ما في شيء بيمنع. بس انا برايي لازم نشوف كسرة صراحة لهالشانل بقى حلا. يعني في حال الان اف بي والانبلويمنت ريت كانوا كمان ايجابيه هذا الشيء بيرجع بيدعم. بس انا بحس من بكره فينا نشوف موف حلو على الماركت. ما ننسى انه اليوم هو افتتاح الشمعة الشهرية اليوم، المانثلي اوبننج اليوم. ابدا السوق ما عمل حركة تذكر بالمانثلي اوبننج. عادة بنشوف تخبط شمال يمين، كل الناس قابضة، كل الناس عم تعمل انفستمنت. اليوم ما كان في موف ابدا على ولا شيء. هون بنحط كمان علامة استفهام كبيرة انه اي متى هذا الموف بده يصير. رح نروح مع بعض على الدبليو تي اي، من بعده اكيد بنحل شوية فوركس. اوكي، كرمال النفط انا النك لاين تبعي تقريبا هون، وعندي ناخد سبورت شوي قريب. عندي سبورت هون، تسكير شمعة الديلي تحت السبورت، من بعدها ريتست. صراحة غريب شوي النفط، يعني بالريسك اوف النفط هو من القصص اللي بتطلع ما بتنزل. انا برأيي انا كمحلل صراحة بعد عنه هاي الفترة. حننزل شوي على لور تايم فريم لنشوف اذا كان في شيء. اوكي، على 4 ساعات ما عندي شيء. اوكي، على الساعة كان عندي ايفنينج ستار، بس ما كانت هالايفنينج ستار قبل. كان عندي دبل بوتوم هون، سكرت دبل بوتوم، من بعدها رجع عمل هذا الموف. اليوم انا برأيي مناطق 80 تراقب على على الاويل. حتى مناطق هون، مناطق ال 79 او اللي هي اريا تقريبا 78 ونص 79، هالمناطق تراقب صراحه. لانه عاده اذا بنرجع شوي لورا رح شوف قديش في يحترم هاي المناطق هون. هاي المناطق تراقب. انا برايي الاويل على المدى الطويل صراحه في يشوفوا هون عم يرجع يطلع لل 93 95 الى اخره. في حال صعدت شوي خبرية الحرب، معقول نشوفوا عم يعمل موف تعجيزي. حنروح على اليورو دولار. كان عندي فلاج اليوم بعتناها على ضروري نفوت نشوفها مع بعض. فيكم تشوفوا التحاليل تبعنا اللي بنبعتها عبر الويب سايت تبعنا، عبر قنواتنا على التليجرام، فيسبوك، وتويتر. رح نروح شوي بس على الاناليزس اللي كنا عاملينه. هيدا كنا عاملينه اليوم، نزلناه اليوم. اليورو كنا رسمين الارو تبع الفلاج، رسمين البروجكشن تبع الفلاج، حطينا فول تورز 1.0400. قلنا انه نحن ببرج ترند. اذا بيجي لهون بقدر شوف انه تقريبا الفلاج تبعي انكسر، وعم نحكي هون فلاج على الديلي. عندي 1 2 3 ومن بعدها عم شوف موف اكيد هون اذا بتزبط شوي هيدا ريتست للكسره. في حال سكرت الشمعه اليوم هيك، في احتمال اني ارجع شوف ريتست صغير على مناطق الواحد فاصلة تقريبا 0.600، ومن بعدها فيني شوفه عم ينزل. في حال كانت هيدي الشمعة اللي هلا عم تصير هون هي اختراق وهمي او فيك بريك اوت، في ارجع شوفه عم يطلع لهون. في حال صار هذا السيناريو في يرجع يعمل موف كتير او يطلع. بس صراحة بشك. رح ننزل على لور تايم فريم لنشوف اذا كان في عندنا شي كونفirmation. انا عادة بنطر صراحة كونفirmation شوي واضحة. صراحة ما كان في شيء. هلا هون يمكن يكون عم يعمل مورنينج ستار او دبل بوتم، بس فيها تكون سكالب صغيرة، من بعدها يكون عم ينزل. رح نختم بالاسترالي دولار، العملة المفضلة عندي صراحة، رينجينج ماركت. دعانة صراحة. أنا صراحة كنت بنطر هون المناطق اللي هي مناطق ال 64 سايكولوجيكال ليفل، اللي هي كمان هون هي سبلاي زون، والكومبينيشن مع الديلي ام اي. صراحة حلو انه كان يوصل لهون ومن بعدها يرجع يفرد. بس انا هلا هون برينجينج ماركت. في حال سكر، هلا هي عم تسكر، في يكون عندي تريبل بوتم، بس هو شوي مايل لرينجينج ماركت. في حال سكرت شمعة فوق مناطق ال 64 بكون عم بشتغل 65. بس انا برايي هذا الشيء كثير صعب. بعتذر رح اقولها، بس هي كل طلعه هلا للاسترالي هي فرصه كرمال نكون عم نروح شورت، كرمال نكون عم نبيع. بسكر هيدا مش توصيات ولا سيجنال. ميرسي لانكم تابعتونا، شكرا على كل المتابعه والدعم لنا. كان معكم جوني عكاري كبير المحللين بشركه اوكشيل. تصبحوا على الف خير.